Let's talk about crime trends. I'm actually going to leave you to review the data materials and the statistic materials that are in the book. I think it's straightforward information. Basically, it establishes that crime trends show a decrease in crime, and that is despite what we are hearing in the news media and what they're talking about. But I'll leave those the data material and the statistical information for you guys to review. But what I do want to take a look at are the factors that influence or affect crimes. And there really stems around things like age structure, mental health treatment, gun availability. Let's go through some of these. Age structure. There's an uptick in crime with younger members of society. Immigration, less prone to crime. Communities with large immigrant population, there's a decrease in crime. There's another factor that the media plays into. Unemployment, there's no correlation between unemployment and it doesn't really affect the economic conditions due to unemployment doesn't affect the crime rate, shockingly as that may be. Gun availability, guns and crime, there's two views. There's no concrete evidence for view one way or the other. Whether you take away guns or restrict the ability, if you take away the view is if you take away guns, you restrict the ability to defend yourself. The other view is too many guns in a population increases violent crimes, but there is no concrete evidence regarding that factor. Gangs, there's an uptick in teenage gangs, and they're actually responsible for a large portion of the violent crimes. Drug use, there's proof that drug use and results in a uptick in violence. Medical technology, more lives saved. The other side of that is could be more murdered. I don't know, but that is certainly one of the factors that are considered. Justice policy. If you add law enforcement and harsher penalties, we have less crime. All of these factors influence these trends, whether there's mental health treatment available. This is a big highlight for mass shootings. This is the biggest topic that comes into play when we're faced with something as horrible as a mass shooting. So keep these factors in mind. I want to switch to crime patterns. What do experts do with their crime data? They try and determine if there's any patterns that appear in the crime rate. The U.S. Justice Department reports on trends and patterns in the country. So it is certainly something that needs to be addressed and look at. And there'll be a link to the U.S. Justice Department's reports on Moodle if you haven't already been on and checked those additional materials, resources section for this chapter. So patterns. The ecological patterns, rural versus suburban. It is no secret that rural and suburban areas have lower crime rates than the urban areas. Why? There's overcrowding. There's drug use, there's social inequalities, there's racial conflicts, there's poverty, and all of those things create a role. Summertime, crime is higher in the summer. That's what the patterns show. Why? More people are outside. Schools are closed. Temperature's too hot, so it kind of flares up the anger. Regions. There's actually patterns that have established that the west and the south of this country have higher crime rates than the Midwest and New England. Gender patterns. Males are more higher than female to commit violent crimes. They say crimes overall, but it's getting actually fairly close. There are, and some of it stems from maybe the women aren't being arrested, or maybe discretion is playing in a role. But males account for 80% of all arrests for serious violent crimes, and more than 60% of all arrests for serious property crimes. Why might that be? These are, set in stone. These are just assumptions that are made. Stronger, because men are stronger, so they're able to commit these crimes better. Hormonal differences make men more aggressive. Females are socialized to be less aggressive and strongly discouraged from anti-behavior. Females have better verbal skills and use them to diffuse conflict. Males are granted greater personal freedom and hence more opportunities to commit crimes. Females are more under the parental control for longer and more, and that all of those things could affect why. Other patterns, not surprising. Racial patterns. Minority groups are disproportionately the main share of criminal activity. These statistics are reporting sources, and this has come from official reporting sources and self-reporting sources. So we have African Americans, the males have been arrested 30% more than the white males. 50% of African Americans have committed a crime by the age of 23 versus 38% of white men. This is obviously, should we say obviously? I don't know that word. The difference may be the function of racism practice within the criminal justice system, or the treatment of African Americans by law enforcement has become, as we know, a significant national concern. Have you seen the news in the last 6 months? And that's not just the last 6 months. This has been with us in this country, and hopefully we will see some changes in that area. And when we explore the cops in the next section, we're going to be talking about this kind of stuff. Social class patterns. There is no, as I said earlier, unemployment doesn't affect crime rates, but rates are higher in more deprived inner city areas where there's more poverty and social discord, due to possibly the lack in economic and social opportunities that strains residents. And then they ultimately turn to crime. There's broken families, youth has no supervision, there's no ability to exert any social control. But on the other side of that, it could be the police aren't focused in those areas. Maybe they're devoting their resources elsewhere. But social class certainly plays a role, and there are some patterns that are showing. Age patterns. Younger people commit more crimes. The peak is 16 years old for property crimes, 18 for violent crimes. Elderly people do not commit crimes, apparently. And if they do, males are more likely, 65 and older, commit DWI, and females shoplifting. So why young people? They take more risks, right? They're immature, limited financial resources. They have the energy and the physical strength and skill to pull it off. Also, the juvenile system isn't as harsh as the adult system. Career patterns. Chronic offenders. They have a criminal mindset. They start early and they continue. They don't care about the system and they don't care about the punishment. Doesn't get any straightforward as that for the pattern of the chronic offender. Victim patterns. Are crime victims generally people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time? No. Victimization is not random. If you live a risky life, you run the risk of becoming a victim. The data tells us that the information about the actual victims, these are the things that play a role, but the patterns I can't stress that the pattern is that victims are never are not in the wrong place at the wrong time. Most victims are living a risky life, and then they have the risk of becoming a victim. That's not to say there aren't crimes where it's random, wrong place, wrong time. Certainly there are. So let's go through some of this data. Gender. Men victims are generally robbery and assault. Those are the patterns that are showing for gender, robbery and assault. For women, it's sexual assault. Age, young people are more likely to be victims than older people. And that sometimes surprises people because the thought is that elderly people are weaker, defenseless. But if you follow the pattern, young people tend to be more living riskier lives and doing riskier things. Income, less affluent, you're more prone to being a victim. Marital status, and this is more related to age, but unmarried more likely to be victims than older people or widowed people. Race, African Americans are victimized at higher rates than others. Ecological factors, victims in larger cities, makes sense. I mean, if you're in an urban area, there's more people, it's a higher crime. There's obviously where you see more victims. Evening hours, more crimes are committed. The most likely site for victimization is in the open public, a street, a park, field, not generally in a private location. Victim and offender relationships. I mean, there's a pattern relative to relationships. 42% of crimes are committed by strangers. The other percent is by people known to the victim, and women are more likely to be victimized by someone they know. We've already mentioned that before. So most of the time, the victim knows who the offender is. Repeat victimization. Individuals who've been victimized have greater chances of being a victim again. And this stems from situations like being in a high crime area or households that have experienced crime, domestic violence for one. It could be, you could continue to be the victim especially if you're in one of those two areas, because there would be continued crime and conduct. So that covers our crime trends and crime patterns. And the next topic we're going to switch to is causes of crime and victimization. We're going to talk about different criminology theories.